Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome to our ninth and final class on Sri. We're going to look at the 17th and 18th verses, the Sri Isopanisad, the last two verses. And first we'll have some announcements from Kishore Gopi.
Moved around the room. So Shamya decided, since we had 9 classes, we got through the Sri Isopanisad, we diligently studied the Sri Isopanisad in 9 classes. Typically all of our little cohorts, as I was calling them, were 12 weeks or longer. So rather than like starting a new little cohort and having people give more donations, he wanted to just give more classes within this. So we're going to read, as just a bonus, Light of the Bhagavad. I just brought it over so you can see it, but I sent it in the WhatsApp group. I'll do it again. You can view it on Vedabase, or there's really beautiful paintings in this book. And so I'd recommend, personally, I like to hold a book, but that's how I am. So really beautiful book. And we're going to read that in 4 classes. And then we'll start, for those that want to continue studying, the next text, which will be a longer text. And we're just really grateful.
Yeah.
Really grateful.
Hare Krishna. I'm gonna have some kirtan.
Back to the other. And yeah. Okay. So good to be back together again. Welcome Tanya, Robin, Haripol. And Tanya, we had you with us in spirit last night, the gathering. Many more to come. I know you were spiritually FOMOing, so we got you. So let's come into our seats. As always, take a moment to locate yourself within this earth suit. Shift around, find any movement, soften your jaw. Right, posture, finding that aligned seat. Filling up your tank with breath. Right, opening your mouth, release your jaw, soften your body. We'll start with our opening prayers, this gratitude, this appreciation, this honoring, this respect to all of our teachers, the acharyas who walk this path before us, bestowing the light of knowledge upon us, removing the darkness of ignorance. Take a deep breath in, fill up. Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Jaya Shri
ज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः जय श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानन्द श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृन्द Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So last week we looked at verses 14, 15, and 16. And so the verses were about how we have to know Krishna, and then it went into, that's 14, and then 15 and 16 went into a prayer. The speaker of Isopanisad is praying, "My Lord, sustainer of all that lives, your real face is covered by your dazzling effulgence. Kindly remove that covering and exhibit yourself to your pure devotee." It's a call for the Lord to exhibit himself personally. And then 16 is another prayer about how, again, to remove the effulgence of the rays so I can see your form of bliss. And it's like the speaker is identifying themselves with the Lord. You are the eternal supreme personality of Godhead, like unto the sun, as am I. I want to be one with you. I'm part of you. So we had some reflections in class and also some beautiful ones on WhatsApp about what it means for the Lord to ask the Lord to show his face. So let's have a little sharing on that before we go into the last two verses, which are on the same, kind of topic. They're very, very much personal prayers. What did it mean for you? Any reflections around these verses? To ask the Lord to show his face?
Our team's dying to share.
Dying. I felt like I read this question that you asked us and I was totally blown away by the idea of even thinking about it. So to even start to explain what it would mean to actually have it be, it's like a level that I am striving for.
Yeah. So sitting with that call to asking the Lord to show his face, which just revealed to you what a high thing that is. It's not a cheap thing. That's very true. It's very real, because this is coming at the end of the Isopanisad. There's all this deep philosophy, and then this philosophy creates the mature realization in the devotee that I need to see you. Really want to see you, Lord. It's this prayer, this fundamental prayer of the devotee, and that's not a cheap thing. It takes living, it takes winning and losing, it takes going through this and internalizing the philosophy. And there's a way in which this is really the culmination, of a lifetime in devotion, is like that mature desire. So that's a powerful realization. Thank you. Anyone else want to reflect what it meant to sit with that question of asking the Lord to reveal his face?
I think it's interesting because I can't imagine feeling like I'm worthy to even consider asking that question. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Humility.
Right.
There. Yeah, that's also that's also there in scripture, that when we see, like in the Srimad Bhagavatam, when devotees actually interact with Krishna, for example, like Prahlad Maharaj, who had been praying to Krishna for so long, and from the time before he was born in the womb of his mother, he was hearing about him from Narada Muni, a pure devotee. And so he had no other interest in life but Krishna. But when Krishna finally appeared, his first prayers were, what am I doing here praying to you? Like, I'm so insignificant. Who am I? And then he kind of like got it together and he said, well, but hold on, because you revealed yourself to Gajendra, the elephant. And Gajendra's only qualification was that he had some devotion for you. So even though I come from this awful family, my father is the king of the terrorists, Hiranyakashipu. I'm just a boy. I don't have any training. I don't know what's what. I'm not together. I'm surrounded by all these demigods. Shiva's here. Brahma's here. Who am I to do it? But still, I know I have some devotion for you. So he's just leaning into that, what he did have, which is actually some real devotion. And yeah, humility was the foundation for those prayers. And it's a common thing in Shastra, it's a common thing in living devotees that you see that humility is there. It's like, who might even ask for that? And yet that's what it comes to. It's like we need Krishna. Thank you. Yeah, the role of humility is such a poignant one. Anyone else want to share anything before we go into the conclusion of these prayers?
It was interesting because we're such physical beings, like we're so hooked on like our bodies, right? And the things that we can see and touch. And so I was reflecting on the fact that yes, like to be actually with Krishna in Vrindavan, like walking around with him would be like the most amazing thing ever. Can't conceptualize it. But at the same time, when we look for Krishna, we see him every day. Right. So it's like this interesting juxtaposition of like, oh, I want to see Krishna's physical form and I want to be able to like be at his lotus feet and like be like humbly, before him. But at the same time, it's like we see him in the devotees and we see him in the deities and we see him in, the little God winks that he gives us. So it is kind of humbling to say like we actually are seeing him every day. We just don't acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And he's seeing us every second, every millisecond of the day, like how that's heavy, and so it's like, even though we're saying, hey, we really want to see you, we are seeing him. And so it's just a cool way to kind of be like, okay, how can I just like be more grateful for that?
Yeah, just being present with what we actually have, who we actually have, that he's actually surrounding us. And in the second verse of the Shikshastakam, Lord Chaitanya prays, he says that your holy name alone can render all benedictions, and it's full of all your own potencies. And there's no hard and fast rules for chanting it. You're completely present in it. Then he says, but I'm so unfortunate that I cannot fully appreciate you. So there's this way in which, at least part of what I heard in what you were saying, is that we understand that he's with us all the time in all these ways, and we get a glimpse of it. But there's like a way in which there's a gap between, there's some space between like what I do realize versus his full face. And so that's kind of part of the prayer, is that it's not even that I need to go to like the special Krishna room and like see Krishna there. It's like I need to see Krishna all the time. I need to see him right now in what I'm doing and what I'm chanting and how I'm at. I need to see him this second in everything I'm doing, because he's not here. This is his universe. This is his energy, all of it. How am I not, being present with that? So this is kind of like these prayers for me, they're an expression of urgency. They're an expression of urgency. And if you think about the kinds of things in life that create urgency, I think at the top of the list would be death. So that's one of the main topics of the last couple of verses, is the time of death, which is a major topic in Bhagavad Gita too. There's a whole chapter dedicated to it. So on that.
Just one thing, it's not really like a deep personal reflection, but I re-listened to George Harrison's My Sweet Lord, and then listening to it with the context of our last class and this question, it was like, oh my God, he was asking such a deep, profound,
it's a very deep prayer
question and prayer, and then he put it out on this record, and
yeah,
all these people knew about it, but like actually didn't know.
It's a very potent song.
Yeah.
That was like I think that album was a triple album. George Harrison was the third most gifted songwriter in a band with John Lennon and Paul McCartney. So he didn't get to write a lot of songs. Yeah. So he had a huge backlog, and he was shot out of a cannon when he went solo. He put out a triple album, and that song was the first #1 hit from a Beatle as a solo song.
Triple album means 3 albums in one.
3 albums, which is very rare. But that's a very powerful spiritual expression from Bhakti George, for sure.
Yeah, and shows like where he actually,
where he was at.
Devotee he was.
And he kept chanting his whole life. That was very important to him. Krishna was there till the end. And speaking of the end, at least of this life, I'll share this verse and we'll explore verse 17. Vayur anilam amritam atedam bhasman bhang shariram Om krato smara kritang smara krato smara kritang smara. Let this temporary body be burnt to ashes, and let the air of life be merged with the totality of air. Now, O my Lord, please remember all my sacrifices. And because you are the ultimate beneficiary, please remember all that I have done for you. So there's some urgency in this one. So in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8, it's talking about how to attain the supreme, and Krishna is talking about the time of death, because that's a natural junction point. Birth is an important point, disease, old age, these things happen through the course of life, but death is the final test. And remembrance, this deep remembrance of Krishna is really the product of our practice. All this sadhana we're doing, practice, repetition, trying, this is really preparation for us. And Prabhupada talks about this a great deal in the purport. He begins by saying, the highest development of one's spiritual sense is described in this mantra. One should give up the material body, which will be turned to ashes, and allow the air of life to merge into the eternal reservoir of air. The process is to give up one material body and then enter into another, but the highest perfection of such changes occurs only when the living entity is able to give up the material body altogether, as suggested in this mantra, and enter into the spiritual atmosphere, where he can develop a completely different type of body, a spiritual body, which never has to meet death or change. And he talks about the gradual development of consciousness that's there in the human form of life. Actually, even human life, he talks about, is a very elevated form of life, capable of allowing one to transition to a spiritual consciousness. Because this human form of life is like, it's like an airport. There's so many places in a city you can go to, but the only place you can go to get a plane is the airport. Can't go anywhere else. Doesn't matter what your car looks like, if you have a bike, doesn't matter what you're doing on the ground, how fast you're moving. If you don't get to the airport, you're not leaving in a plane. So the human form of life is like that, because the human form of life can hear spiritual sound, consider it, take it into one's heart. This is a special consideration of our material form. So even that humanity, for all of our foibles, is a very, very privileged position, actually. And then Prabhupada talks about how you can spend many lifetimes culturing knowledge, as per Bhagavad Gita 7:19. After so many lifetimes, the perfection of the culture of knowledge is recognizing that there's a supreme person and surrendering there. That's what that verse 7:19 Bhagavad Gita says. And so there's this way in which the body we've been granted is part of a great evolution, and our own Atman, our self, has gone through so much to gather spiritual knowledge. And in our life as a devotee, we are developing our relationship, we're constructing it, we're solidifying it more and more all the time. This verse, if you look at what the prayer says, it says, please remember all my sacrifices, right? And because you are the ultimate beneficiary, remember all that I've done for you. Beneficiary means one who enjoys something, right? The one who gets the benefit. Krishna is the enjoyer of all sacrifices. The last verse of the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita says this. All sacrifices are meant for him. Anything we're doing, the ultimate enjoyer is actually Krishna. That's the correct understanding of reality. There are so many ways in which other people will enjoy, or we ourselves get some benefit from what we do. But the ultimate enjoyer, the ultimate upline, is Krishna. So the prayer here is, remember all that I've done. And Prabhupada talks about in the purport something very poignant, that the dying human being can remember the activities of their life like dreams at night, right? Therefore, their mind remains surcharged with material desires, and consequently, they cannot enter into the spiritual kingdom with a spiritual body, right? Because that necessitates then taking birth again to play out your desires. The devotees, however, develop a sense of love of Godhead by practicing devotional service to the Lord. Even if at the time of death a devotee does not remember his service to the Lord does not forget him. This prayer is given to remind the Lord of the devotee's sacrifices, but even if there is no such reminder, the Lord does not forget the service rendered by his pure devotee. So this prayer is a prayer that, don't forget me. Remember what I've done and help me remember it too. And Prabhupada is affirming that the Lord doesn't need such reminders. As you were saying, I mean, like, we sometimes think of Krishna and see him. He's seeing us all the time. We see him with like our myopic vision. He sees us with 20/20 perfect vision all the time. He actually knows exactly what we've done. And he never forgets any act performed for him. With great gratitude, he remembers that. So Prabhupada is giving us that as tremendous encouragement. And still, the devotee here is practically pleading, like, don't forget me, remember me, and help me remember you. Please remember all that I've done for you. It's not like, Krishna doesn't need it's not like going to a court of law. You have to have a good lawyer to convince the judge of your case. Like, the devotee is not trying to play lawyer advocate for himself. Like, you see what I really tried this time, Krishna. I really had a good life for you. It's not like that. This is very heartfelt. It's not a business deal. It's like, let this body be burnt to ashes. It's going away anyway. What I really have is my remembrance of you. And it's as much a prayer to oneself to remember that everything is supposed to be for Krishna anyway, as it is to Krishna. And Prabhupada quotes from Bhaktivinoda Thakur in the purport too. He says, he goes on at length. There's a large paragraph about this, but he refers to the Bhagavad Gita 9:30 and 31, in which Krishna says that if my devotee makes some mistake and performs some, what Prabhupada translates as abominable action, not even like, kind of shady, like an abominable, like very not right action, they should be understood to be situated properly because of their determination to serve me, right? And Prabhupada quotes from Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and they both explain that when you're in the world with a material body, you have to do your material business and your spiritual business side by side, which is when the Isopanisad is talking about, do these things side by side. Sometimes you're trying to be a sincere devotee, but there's what Prabhupada calls, there is a chance for an occasional exhibition of worldliness. Right? Doesn't mean you take advantage of that. Oh yeah, I have free reign to do occasional exhibitions of worldliness. It's like, this means you're trying. Your sincerity is there, right? Sincerity is a major lesson we've had the last few verses. But still, there's some way in which, like, despite yourself, you cannot come to this highest standard all the time. There's a chance for an occasional exhibition of worldliness, but it should be noted that such worldliness cannot continue for long because, by the grace of the Lord, such imperfections will come to an end very shortly. Therefore, the path of devotional service is the only right path. If one is on this right path, even an occasional occurrence of worldliness does not hamper one in the advancement of self-realization. So, speaking to the humility point that came out, Tanya was mentioning humility, and asking the Lord to reveal his face. We can feel like, who am I to even ask? Like, I've made so many mistakes. I've fallen short in so many ways. That feeling is built into today's verse as well. That there's a way in which the devotees acutely aware of how they wish they could do more. I spoke with a senior devotee one time, and I was expressing how, basically, like, I wish I could do more in bhakti. Kind of was the mood of my question or like, the discussion. And they were saying, yeah, me too. I go to bed every night feeling, they told me, like, I wish I could have done more. And I also don't let that hold me back, because it's important to remember what you did do and offer that deliberately without being full of regrets and being paralyzed by your own, small nature. Both things should be there. You should be like, I'm really grateful for everything I could do today and every chance you gave me, Krishna, and I'd love to do more tomorrow. That's natural. That's a natural devotional feeling. Otherwise, if you don't have both of those things, you're either completely unable to appreciate any service you've done because you completely consider yourself useless, which is not a healthy place to be, right? Or you don't ever see any way in which you could do better. You're already perfect. And there's no room for Krishna to inspire you, to fan that spark into a bigger flame, right? Which is also very static and not a good place to be. So both things are true. And that's what I got from this devotee when we were talking about this, that there's a way in which, in this prayer, the devotee is saying, like, remember what I've done and let all that's temporary be taken away, but I want to remember you, and please, please remember me. And they're identifying at this time of death with Krishna. So there's this real sense of urgency. And yeah, that's really what I had for this verse. And then Prabhupada just affirms again that our sadhana is really practice for this time of death. He says, how does he put it? Unless one is accustomed to devotional practice, what will they remember at the time of death, when the body is dislocated? And how can they pray to the Almighty Lord to remember their sacrifices? Sacrifice means denying the interest of the senses. In other words, for the sake of Krishna. Like, we could do anything with our time. Every time we're chanting in kirtan or doing any service at all, we could have done anything with that time. We're choosing that, no, I want to do this for Krishna, right? That's sacrifice. One has to learn this art of sacrifice by employing the senses in the service of the Lord during one's lifetime. One can utilize the results of such practice at the time of death, right? It's like the ultimate kind of farming thing. You have to sow and then you reap. We're sowing every day. If we can't do every second, we're trying to do something every day. That's what a daily practice means. We're putting that in the transcendental bank. And the benefit really comes in at the time of death. Ultimately, there's so many benefits throughout the lifetime too. So many benefits. We're not like just saying, just wait for it. When you die, it'll all be real. Just hope until then. That's not what we're saying. But there's a way in which there's a kind of big stepwise thing that happens when you leave this body, and you don't have any more time for practice. Just like if you show up to class and teacher says, "Okay, everybody, put your books away. Pop quiz." Whatever you studied, that's it. That's all you have time for. Whatever you're carrying with you, if you're just jibber jabbing about what was on the TV and that's all you got in your head, you don't remember anything you studied for the last 3 months, that's what you got. If you wasted the last 2 weeks, you haven't studied and looked through the material at all, haven't cracked the book, that's what you got. But if you sincerely studied even a little bit, then when you sit down there and like, oh, come on, remember, it'll come to you, right? It's the pop quiz. Because who can say, right, when it's going to happen? So this is Prabhupada's conclusion to the purport. Now we'll take any comments, any questions, or reflections on this theme, on this verse, remembrance of our sacrifices for Krishna, this prayer to Krishna, let this body be burnt to ashes, please remember what I've done for you. And these themes of remembrance in the time of death, cultivation throughout one's life, the humility of the devotee who considers himself having, that they feel like they've fallen short so much. And the special privilege of the human form of life that we can cultivate remembrance. Anything that stood out? Questions?
I really appreciate the distinction that it's really like a call, a prayer filled with humility, not with, and there is desperation, but the way that I read it, or I read it, is like, please remember all that I have done for you. So it's kind of like, from the material sense, it's like, remember like all the list of amazing things I've done so that you will, bring me, like I can come home to you or whatever it may be. And it isn't necessarily that quality. It's more of like, please let me remember you when I'm dying, right? When I'm leaving my body, versus like, the list of rites that I've done.
Yeah. So
Does
that
makes sense? It's like a
it
different-
does, because that's like, that kind of highlights the difference in approach to scripture or spirituality between somebody who's really harboring a material motive
Right.
versus a spiritual motive. Because I mean, Isopanisad has been read by many people. The holy books have been read by so many people. And I forget who said this, as a Christian theologian. They said, We read the Bible day and night. You read the black, I read the white. But you can read the same book and you come at it completely differently. And so one fundamental worldview that is criticized in Bhagavad Gita itself early on in the second chapter, Krishna criticizes it, is to see the scripture as a means for supporting my own material advancement in this life or the next. So you could take this verse in isolation and be like, yeah, this is proof that we're supposed to like be pious and good so that we win
Yeah.
the game of life and go to a place where we can enjoy more, because that's what winning is. And there's so many verses in the Vedas that can support that interpretation, but it's an inferior interpretation because that's not the whole story of what Krishna is trying to offer us and the scripture is trying to offer us. And the spiritual goal is like, yeah, it's not about that, because he said, let this temporary material body be burnt to ashes. And otherwise, all the material currency is just like ashes, dust in the wind. It's just going. I let it go. I'm letting it go. I want to remember you. Please remember me. Let what really counts count. And so the mature devotee who reads this, like Prabhupada, and he presents it to us in that light, helps us see that the only thing that really matters is our relationship with Krishna. That's what lasts, and that's ultimately what's being prayed for here. It's not the devotee. This is not someone cheating themselves asking for a heavenly planet or some kind of reward for good karma. This is a devotee asking for Krishna. Yeah, thank you for that. Any other reflections or comments or questions?
I'll go, Shami Pras.
Please.
I liked how you said that all of what we're doing in our sadhana is the prep for us, for the end.
Mm.
I just feel like there is, and you told the story of the senior devotee, and I've heard stories of how family members, someone's, at the end of their life, and the family can't rally around that person because they're too nervous, they're too scared of where they're going. But often I've heard, at least a couple times that devotees are able to be present because they don't have this fear of where they're going. And I feel that way. I feel like there's just great comfort in that. And that if we keep, because it's a big thing. Sometimes I think about, okay, if a car's coming at me, or would I think of Krishna at this moment? Like that's what we have to do. We have to think of Krishna at the end. And but if you are just chanting and you are just practicing the sadhana, your sadhana all the time, that's good. That it'll go into your into your bank. So I think that I wanted to comment on that. And then there was one other thing. And
Yeah,
I like,
just on that
go
first
ahead.
point.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a very consistent, experience of devotees, because the maturing devotee, they understand theoretically and then they understand practically for themselves the difference between the soul and the body. So the time of death, although it's challenging, it's never not challenging. The mystery and the horror and the fear is eliminated, because of transcendental vision. It's like Prabhupada, again, I've given this example from Prabhupada, that death is like, it's like a cat. I think when the cat carries its kittens in its mouth, that's a very peaceful experience for the kittens, just moving from A to B. But that's those same jaws that carry a mouse. That's mortal terror and impending doom, right? So the experience of the kitten, oh, cool, mom's taking me. This is gonna be fun, free ride. Versus the mouse struggling and like failing to get free and wiped out, Practically they have a heart attack before they can get chomped just out of that fear. Those are two completely polar opposite experiences. And somebody who hasn't invested in Krishna, invested in bhakti, invested in transcendental psychology of philosophy, they don't have necessarily so much realization around that. So it can be very difficult for them. And devotees often, like, it becomes apparent, to people who didn't appreciate at the time of death, like what value there is when a devotee is around. If you can't do anything else, play the Maha Mantra for the person who's leaving.
That's good. That's it. So many good points.
Thank you. Do you have another point?
It's, I mean, you've sort of touched on it, just that, and I think Kishori did too, is that Krishna is the enjoyer of our sacrifices, and I like to think about that sometimes when, you are getting up early and you think, oh, I don't want to, or, just these things, prasad, offering, you could just eat, but taking the time, all these different things that are become part of us then. Um, I have to say, I was walking my dog and I was chanting, and I meant to, he got away from me, and I yelled, Hare Krishna, and I meant to yell his name, but I had said it too many times that I laughed out loud to myself. I was like, did I just cause it? Because it just came so automatically. So there was
You're
some hope
desperate.
in
Yeah.
that. And then I was like, did
You can
anybody?
tell what's happening in your heart when you stub your toe. What comes out?
Yes.
Is it an
Oh,
expletive? Is it Krishna? Yeah. So, yeah, like what you said about taking the time to offer our food to Krishna. It can seem like a rule. It can seem like a formality or a ritual, but the idea of trying to conform to a bhakti practice is that it creates natural remembrance. Because every time we try to connect to Krishna, we thicken that connection between us and him more. Now, from his side, there's no problem. He's willing to have a complete relationship with us. From our side, every little attempt we make strengthens and solidifies that, so that, yeah, when we break our toe, when the dog runs away, when someone dies, when we're about to die, then we can lean on an existing relationship that will be there, at the time of crisis, because it's been sown. Then you can reap it.
thank you.
There's relating back to last night with Raghunath Prabhu, there's, not to be a total spoiler alert, but in his book, there is 2 times, but one that's very, very, like, I have the image burned in my brain of he was attacked. And he was basically thinking, I'm gonna die now. And he went directly to the Maha Mantra and was saying it very loudly out loud as he was being attacked. And it's just like that visual remembrance of like a devotee going there and remembering that at the time of like kind of the worst is just such an inspiration to take with us to kind of, again, like, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm practicing. And when you see people, another devotee, like doing that in their own practice, it's just like such an uplifting thing to say, like, no, like, not that it, I feel so bad that he went through that, but he showed an example of like where we should go when we're in that kind of situation.
Chai. Those kinds of things are why he wrote the book. Anything else before we move to verse 18? Okay. The last verse. I'll share the screen. Agninayaspataraya sman vishvani deva vayunani vidvan yutyasmadjuhuranameno bhuishtang tenam ukteng vidhema. O my Lord, as powerful as fire, O omnipotent one, now I offer you all obeisances, falling on the ground at your feet. O my Lord, please lead me on the right path to reach you. And since you know all that I have done in the past, please free me from the reactions to my past sins, so that there will be no hindrance to my progress. Right? I'll read that again, really powerful. O my Lord, as powerful as fire, O omnipotent one, now I offer you all obeisances, falling on the ground at your feet. O my Lord, please lead me on the right path to reach you. And since you know all that I have done in the past, please free me from the reactions to my past sins, so that there will be no hindrance to my progress. Again, the point here is that they want to come to Krishna. That's the progress. But there's a way in which, free me from the reactions to my past sins. Prabhupada begins the purport by saying, the Lord is like fire. He's addressed as fire because he can burn anything into ashes, including the sins of the surrendered soul. We defined sin way back in our Bhagavad Gita class. Sin in this tradition means anything that takes you away, keeps you away, separates you from your source. That's sin. Anything that's a wedge between you and Krishna, that's sin. And that's the ultimate consequence. The ultimate consequence isn't punishment. The punishment is The real punishment is forgetfulness of our source, forgetfulness of our real nature, therefore the darkness that you have because of that, and that ignorance. So that's sin. And any time wasted in anything that doesn't help us remember Krishna, the devotee can consider that in this way, you know. Again, bit of a loaded word, sin, but Prabhupada uses it here. He uses it consistently throughout the Shastra. Whether he's translating the word, you know, in the word here is ana, a vice, you know, a vice, or whatever else, is using it in the sense of whatever keeps us away from Krishna. The devotee's asking for there to be no hindrance, right? No block in their progress to Krishna. So the verse again begins with, you know, I'm falling on the ground at your feet, right? I'm offering you all obeisances. Again, this is very humble. This is demonstrating the realization of how much we're dependent, right? Oh, powerful is fire. Like, it's acknowledging Krishna's greatness here. And in the purport, Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, one second. He talks about how surrender is the shortcut, because he gives a description of the gradual progression of a person's consciousness, how one can cultivate Brahminical consciousness through cultivating the mode of goodness, come to the point where they can be qualified, develop the qualifications of the Brahmana, and engage in Brahminical action, spiritual practice, that at least qualify you for a better birth. And then this way, after many lifetimes of this way, you get promoted from the platform of fruitive activities, karma, good karma, to the platform of transcendental knowledge. After many lifetimes of cultivating transcendental knowledge, one becomes perfect when they surrender unto the Lord. This is the general procedure. But Prabhupada says, but one who surrenders at the very beginning, as recommended in this mantra, at once surpasses all preliminary stages simply by adopting the devotional attitude. That's the whole point. That's the whole goal. The whole goal is mature surrender. All of human culture culminates in that. So if one takes the shortcut, they save themselves so many births. In many ways, that's what Lord Chaitanya's movement is, because this gradual procedure Prabhupada's talking about is not so viable in the atmosphere of this age. It's not so viable because the spiritual culture is not intact. The respect for authority, the potent and authorized, you know, spiritual leaders, the gradual progression with like people, you know, being supported to practice according to whatever their material qualifications. You can be a Vaishya, you can be a Shudra, and like do that for some lifetime and come up and eventually become a Brahmana. That's not available so much. Where are the Brahmins to, you know, train people from the age of 5 in the Gurukula? All this is very good. And we can take from all these different things as much as possible into our movement, but the whole thing is not available. That's what this age is about. It's the age of quarrel, it's the age of hypocrisy, it's the age of deceit, it's the age of short lives, it's the age of distraction. And so the Mahamantra is a shortcut. And the essential literature of Bhagavad Gita in these books is a shortcut, and they all really point to surrender. Surrender is the essence of Bhagavad Gita. Surrender is the essence of the mood of chanting the Mahamantra. Just actually asking for help, asking for Krishna to give us the best thing, even if we don't understand what it is. And so this mood, as Prabhupada says, one who surrenders at the very beginning at once surpasses all preliminary stages. If you don't have anything else, it doesn't matter. But if you have that one thing, mood of surrender to Krishna, whatever else you need will be provided for you. But if you have all the other stuff, you're clean, you come from a great family, you're very educated, you're very qualified in all respects, you have transcendental knowledge even of Brahman, but you don't have any feeling for Krishna, no sense of surrender, you're actually not that fortunate, ultimately. And Prabhupada supports this with so much Shastra in the purport. And in the last paragraph of the purport, he translates on the fly in English a section from the second chapter of Bhagavatam. It's a very important section from the chapter called forget what that chapter is called. I'm blanking on it, but it's the second chapter of the Bhagavatam. It's a very important chapter. And in verses 17 to 20 of that chapter, Sutta Goswami describes the gradual elevation of one's consciousness, the devotee. And Prabhupada describes it this way. I'll read the paragraph to you. It's kind of a short paragraph, but it's really a summary of our whole process and our whole lifetime if we're successful. Hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord is itself an act of piety. The Lord wants everyone to hear and chant his glories because he is the well-wisher of all living entities. By hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord, one becomes cleansed of all undesirable things, and then one's devotion becomes fixed upon the Lord. At this stage, the devotee acquires the Brahminical qualifications, mode of goodness qualifications, and the effects of the lower modes of nature, passion, and ignorance completely vanish. The devotee becomes fully enlightened by virtue of his devotional service, and thus he comes to know the path of the Lord and the way to attain him. As all doubts diminish, he becomes a pure devotee. That's our whole process. It's a summary of those verses. In a prayer that Prabhupada wrote to Krishna on the Jaladuta as he was approaching Boston Harbor, he also translates this section summarizing to Krishna and for himself what he considered his mission to help people to do is to hear and chant about Krishna, be cleansed of that, gradually come to the higher modes of nature, let go of rajas and tamas, ignorance and passion, and have one's doubts diminish, become strengthened in one's bhakti, become enlightened in one's bhakti, and become a pure devotee. That's our whole process. That's what our lifetime looks like in bhakti. It's like gradually coming through those stages, powered by that hearing and chanting and sangha. So in that way, that's the very last paragraph of the Isopanisad. In that way, Prabhupada, he crystallizes these verses about the time of death, about the remembrance of Krishna, about all that I've done for you. You know, I'm let there be no hindrance to my progress. In other words, what does progress mean? What does it mean for us today to read these verses? Prabhupada puts in that paragraph. It's like, whatever you're doing to hear and chant, whatever you're doing to try and stay in the mode of goodness and let go of the lower modes, whatever you're doing to address your doubts and become convinced and develop devotion for Krishna, that's part of your ultimate mission as a human being, as a soul, more than a human being, as a soul. That's part of your ultimate mission. That's what's going to create this prayer for you, create this relationship for you with Krishna. So now we'll take any comments, questions, and reflections on that, or on anything in the Isopanisad.
That chapter is called Divinity and Divine
Divinity and
Service.
Divine Service. It's a very important chapter. It's got like 15 verses in there, at least a dozen that Prabhupada quotes all over the place. It's such a foundational chapter of philosophy. Let's get some reflections. Reflection means anything you heard that you're taking away from this last verse or from the entire Isopanisad, anything that's staying out right now. If right now was a time of death, what would you remember from this? It is a time of death for our Isopanisad study group. Our study process, our formal study process has come to a close. So now you got pop quiz. Reflect back.
Mm.
It'll help me.
Okay, all the-
Don't go ahead.
Please go. Please go.
Okay, thank you. Just that we have this knowledge. We are lucky enough to get this knowledge and don't waste our time here.
We have this knowledge. We're fortunate. Don't waste our time.
Yep,
Thank you. Yeah, urgency.
urgency.
Urgency and gratitude.
Taking the, sorry, go ahead. Robin, you go first.
Oh, sorry.
Robin, then Tanya, then Mel.
I think it's so common for people to come to a place of fear. Like, we all have a past, or a lot of us have a past. And instead of being like, oh, I'm going to get punished for all my sins, or you know, because of a lot of religions, you're like, all right, you're going to hell because you had a few bad years
Good
of
enough.
your life. And I always like this feeling like, yes, we all have a past, but it counts for where you started and what you're doing with the rest of your life and what you're now I have this devotion, now I have this knowledge, and it's now the bank is starting to add up. So it's
Yeah.
refreshing.
Yeah, it's encouraging.
Yeah.
It's definitely not like the mood is not finger wagging and shaming. It doesn't help to do that to people. It can catch you some interest because you can attract people who will be like cowed. They'll be like you shame them into like doing the right thing temporarily, but it doesn't create any lasting shift. And doing it to ourselves doesn't help either. It's not really useful. That's not Prabhupada's mood. That's not the mood of Krishna. It's not the mood of bhakti. It's a very encouraging mood. We soberly are aware of what's not going to help us, you know? And we also are aware that every person, including the most sincere devotees, may be like falling short in some way, shape, or form. And nobody's perfect, short of Krishna. But we try to do the best we can. And there's a way in which you get forward progress. You get forward progress. Everything counts. Thank you.
Kind of a perfect follow-up to what Robin was saying, because in the purport while you were reading, I saw that Prabhupada wrote, to err is human, a conditioned soul is very apt to commit mistakes.
Yeah.
And basically the theme of this chapter is that unintentional sins or mistakes are solved by surrendering to the Lord. So
Yeah.
we don't need to beat ourselves up over the things that we did in the past, because we're learning and we're thinking of him at the time of death.
That's the advantage of surrender, is that you're somebody's ward. You're actually protected. Is that and surrender is like an active process because we're actually acting in surrender throughout our lives by trying to take the instructions. You know, it's not just like a thing of like, oh, I believe and therefore I'm saved. That's not what surrender looks like. It means we try to do what will help us. We try to practice bhakti moment to moment. That's actually acting in surrender, you know, and showing that to Krishna that I'm trying. That means that we're qualified for this. And Prabhupada says, the Lord takes charge of fully surrendered souls. Thus, all problems are solved simply by surrendering oneself unto the Lord and acting in terms of his directions. Such directions are given to the sincere devotee in two ways, internally and externally, right? Through one's own conscience, the super soul within, and externally from the scripture and spiritual masters, spiritual teachers. Thank you. And Mel.
Yeah, I was going to actually speak a little bit to like just the fearlessness that's brought up in Bhagavad Gita. Like this makes me think so much about that, and that's something that I've just been really meditating on and holding really close for the last like 6 months or so. Like that idea and concept of fearlessness and what that means, and how can you tap into like achieving fearlessness and through surrender. And so you kind of just spoke about that a little bit, and it's really, for me, that's a lot of what this verse means. It's also a lot of what this whole text means. It's like, how do we get to that point of, getting down on the ground and really offering and giving our life in order to be able to just, there's a fearlessness that comes with that. And at the time of death, like it can feel peaceful. It can feel like you're returning home to Godhead. It can feel like you're, actually about to be wrapped in a warm embrace, like those sorts of things. And even when we're living in our lives, we can feel that too. Like we don't have to like live in fear. We can step into that fearlessness that's offered through surrender, that's provided through surrender.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was thinking about.
Thank you. Yeah, in the moment-to-moment experience of our bhakti process, what we're doing is we're giving ourselves the gift of tasting what it feels like to surrender to Krishna, like a little bit at a time. We try to do some service, we try to associate, we try to chant sincerely, and we experience in real time what that feels like, right? And yeah, fearlessness. So was gonna say something. Kind of slipping right now, but it might come back to me. Yeah, that we're trying to give ourselves that experience because of the time. Yeah, so at the time of death, there's a way in which, as Prabhupada mentions, like it's such a jarring, like dislocating experience. It's a great test, you know, what's going to come up for us. So to be able to trust Krishna is what we're creating through our bhakti process. Is we're creating our own conviction about him. You know, it's not like a mental construct of belief. We're actually creating something by repeatedly running the experiment of what it feels like to trust Krishna and have him come through for us. And that's how we can be fearless. There's an expression, and I don't remember who said this first. I don't know if it was Prabhupada or one of his followers, but or even someone outside the movement, but it's been used by devotees many times to talk about this cultivation, is to die before dying, right? Our fundamental problem is that we think we're in control. We have this false ego. It's all about me. I am the body. I'm the enjoyer. I'm the mind. And that's not true. I'm actually a servant of Krishna. So what has to die is that whole false conception that has to die. But if we choose to let go of that, bit by bit, even tiny bit by tiny, we can pull that band-aid off, let it go before it's ripped off at the time of death. And it's completely evident to us what a ridiculous farce of a lie that was. If we can let go of it willingly, that's dying before dying. That is up to us. We can do that. And that is absolutely what we should do, because that's what makes that time of death like the kitten being carried. No problem. No problem. Because it's a totally intact relationship with Krishna. I'm not distracted by like, oh no, my business, who's going to take care of it? It's like, come on. Krishna's been taking care of it for the last 30 years. Come on, please. I've been taking care of it. I've been doing what I need to do, but I'm just a little cog in the wheel. He doesn't need me. I don't have to come back for that. I need him. So all those misconceptions, they're gone because we die before dying. That's what our process is like, you know, choosing to let go of it before it's taken from you. You know, like if I told you you're going to lose your money by the end of the year and you knew what I said was true, you'd give it away, right? You'd give it away. And so there's a way in which, like, if you know it's not yours, you know it's not fundamentally yours, you would at least relinquish your identification with this. Like, okay, I'm the steward of it right now. I'm the steward of this body. I'm the steward of my family. I'm the steward of all these duties. I'm going to do them. I'm not going to shirk them. They've been given to me by Krishna. I'm not saying like I'm going to ignore them. I'm going to walk off into the sunset, forget about them. But it's all just Krishna's, whatever he wants. And as soon as he says, time to go home, pack up your things, turn off the lights, we're going. Can't argue with it. Die before dying. So that's what I remembered when you were sharing that.
Yeah, probably when Prabhupada was asked, what do you think about when you're chanting the Maha Mantra?
He said, what do you feel like? He says,
do
I
you
feel
feel?
fearless.
I feel fearless. Yeah, and in all of these amazing texts that Prabhupada translated for us and that we study and we study again and again and again, it's like can seem like there is so much to learn, like look at the library, those that have more extensive libraries, and the same thing is being said
Yeah.
in like thousands of ways, right? In so many ways, and to like remember like the simple teachings,
Yeah.
and this calling out for help, this surrender, this you said in an earlier class that bhakti is applying a submissive service attitude, and then one can know Krishna, and that submissiveness is unresisting, right? And so it's this like to stop resisting what our soul is hankering for most, right? Lamenting for most, but our mind gets so distracted and think we're hankering and lamenting for all these things in our own material
Yeah.
life, right? And to like stop resisting. And then I also feel that as a way to describe surrender. It's like the absence of resistance. You know, and then like Prabhupada's last paragraph here is hear and chant, be with devotees. You know, it's like it comes back to these same things,
Yeah.
same basic principles again and again and again.
The action points are the same.
Yeah.
And it's still so useful to go through the whole exercise
Absolutely.
from the beginning to end.
Right.
And the action points are like after reading the Isopanisad, we should ask yourself, well, what does that mean for me? And then Prabhupada's like, this is what it means for you. Hear and chant so that you can become free from doubts. Hear and chant so you can be in sattva guna at least, and then cultivate the Brahminical qualities and, you know, what those verses in Bhagavatam tell us from the second chapter. That's what you're getting from your daily practice. That's what you're giving yourself the gift of, so that you can die before dying. You know, you can study for that test before the quiz gets popped, you know, with no notice.
Right. And asking questions and submitting ourselves and rendering service, right? These ways that we can really know Krishna then.
Jai. Any other reflections or comments or questions on the Isopanisad? Anything that stood out from the verses throughout the book? I still just really appreciate the 6th and 7th verses about how when you see the Lord in everyone, you can't have any anxiety or fear. And well, let me just pull those verses up because they're still my favorites.
6 and 7, which ones?
6 and 7, yeah. He who systematically sees everything in relationship to the Supreme Lord, who sees all living beings as his parts and parcels, and sees the Supreme Lord within everything, never hates anything or any being. One who sees all living entities as spiritual sparks in quality, one with the Lord becomes a true knower of things. What then can be illusion or anxiety for him? There's a benefit of becoming Krishna conscious is that way before the time of death, you actually just get an illusion-free, anxiety-free existence where you don't hate anybody. You have no enemies. The devotee has no enemies. They're not the enemy of their own enemy. Somebody can say, I'm an enemy of that devotee, but the devotee doesn't have any enemies. They don't see any such distinctions. That's a great way to live. Especially in such with the political atmosphere and everything in Kali Yuga, the polarizing. We've got the American elections coming up against everyone's just at each other's throat. But Isopanisad is giving us enemy-free existence. Pretty good. Any more reflections before we conclude? Yes.
I have something in my inbox, and it's interesting because for the classes that I was blessed enough to be able to attend, we talked a lot about knowledge, and we talked about the comparison of the material world and the spiritual world, and we talked about surrender. And Chaitanya Charan, who I just adore, he wrote something, and it was interesting because we talk a lot about examples of devotees who have done this with their lives, but we also have examples of people like Dhritarashtra that haven't done it with their lives. And he wrote this really cool thing that I've actually thought a lot about. Why did Dhritarashtra not surrender after seeing Krishna? Because we just talked about oh my gosh, if I saw Krishna, holy moly, I'd be weeping and you know, but there have been people that have seen Krishna. And so he basically just says, you know, why did he not surrender? Because his attachment was a blinding cloud. And the great vision Krishna gave him was like lightning. It flashed across the sky of his consciousness, spreading brilliant illumination, but only for a few moments. And then after that, the cloud of his attachments again covered that wisdom, and he went back to seeking the kingdom for himself and his son. Wisdom can act as light for those who are open-minded, but for those who are attached, wisdom acts like lightning, a brief illumination followed by darkness. And so I also pray that please, Lord, don't let me be like Dhritarashtra. You know, if you're giving me this knowledge and you're letting me see you and you're helping me see the difference between what's temporary and what's not, help me not be so clouded by like all the things coming at us that like that doesn't just happen as a flash. Please let it actually like lead in my life. So it was kind of, I don't like dwelling on the negative, but I think it's sometimes interesting to see like when we don't listen to the words of the Upanishads and Isopanishads, and we don't listen to the Gita, like what does that look like? And Krishna's given us this example in Dhritarashtra of like what that looks like, and like let's just be careful and protect our bhakti so we don't go there.
Yeah. The same Prabhupada who said he felt fearless when he was chanting. There was one pastime where he had given a class, and in the class he said that the pure devotee, the truly pure devotee, who has no other motive but serving Krishna, they cannot fall down from that platform. They cannot fall down, and which is supported in scripture. That is 100% true. And when this one devotee heard that, they remembered it, and then they noticed that Srila Prabhupada, after paying obeisances to the deities in this temple where they were staying, would always get up and go to the deities with folded hands and say some things and pray. And no one could hear what he was saying. It was just praying to the Lord. And the devotee, perhaps they had, a darshan with Prabhupada, or they were a servant, but they had some time, and they asked him, Srila Prabhupada, I was wondering if you could tell me, what do you pray for when you take darshan, the deity, after you get up? And he says, Prabhupada says, I'm praying to the Lord that I do not ever fall down. And the devotee said, but Srila Prabhupada, you just said in your class that the pure devotee can never fall down. And Srila Prabhupada said, yes, that is why I cannot fall down. Because I'm always praying like this. So that's how he chose to kind of resolve that there is a way in which like that constant humility in practice is like, it translates to actually asking Krishna for, Prabhupada is asking for help. If Prabhupada is asking for help, why am I not asking for help? Prabhupada doesn't need help. I need help. But Prabhupada's asking for help. Therefore, he doesn't need help. I'm not asking for help. Therefore, I need help. That's the problem. Do you see that? So there's a way in which like Prabhupada's Krishna consciousness is uninterrupted. Therefore, he's always in communion with Krishna. He's always thinking, may I always remember you. Like you're saying, let this not be a flash in the pan. Let me be in it for the marathon, not the sprint. Let me do this right. And the pure devotee is always with Krishna. But we're in and out, we're here and there. And that's normal. That's normal. We're not Prabhupada. But that's a very, very legitimate prayer. It's like, you've given me so much. Let me not forget it and take it for granted and lose it. Let me not be flash in the pan, forgotten, a story, a statistic. Let me be in it for the long haul. Help me to do that, Krishna. Yeah, that could be a way of conceptualizing what the prayer is at the end of Isopanisad. Is like, maybe the devotee is going through some challenges and they're really praying to Krishna, like, let there be no hindrance. Let me like get through this and remember you and not be a statistic. And let my bhakti persevere. That's a legitimate, interpretation. Thank you. And of course, Krishna answers such prayers. He has no other business but to answer such sincere prayers. Anything else?
Thanks for sharing that, Prabhupada.
Yeah, it's beautiful, right? So for this week, we finished Isopanisad. Haribol! But we didn't finish our reflections. We get to reflect in the WhatsApp. Your reflection exercise is to share anything you have realized or have any feeling around what it means to be Krishna conscious at the time of death. What does it mean to come to the time of death, the final test, the final exam? Whether it's what you want that to look like for you, whether it's, have you ever been around another person when they're leaving their body, or any realization or hope or prayer, anything around this time of death question, this urgency question. Yeah, and then can you pass me the Light of the Bhagavad?
Yes.
We're gonna start Light of the Bhagavad next week. That's Light of the Bhagavad. This is a book that has a very interesting history. A nice picture of Krishna on the front there. This book was found as a manuscript after Srila Prabhupada left the planet by Tamal Krishna Goswami, I believe. And Srila Prabhupada in the 50s talks about it here. The preface mentions it. In 1961, there was a Congress for Cultivating the Human Spirit, an international religious conference to be held in Japan. 1961, 4 years before Prabhupada came to the West. 5 years? And Srila Prabhupada was living in Vrindavan. He was a sannyasi. He had no money. He tried to gather the funds to go to Japan for this Congress for the Human Spirit. And he wrote this. This is a summary of one chapter of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And in that chapter, the chapter is called Description of the Rainy Season in Vrindavan. And in the chapter, the nature, the clouds, the turning of the seasons, the weather shifting, they're all looked at philosophically. And Prabhupada gives an explanation of all these different things as representative aspects of spiritual culture. And what he did was he wrote this manuscript, and then he left it somewhere. It was not published while he was on the planet, and then he left his body. And his disciples found it. And it was paired. It was paired with traditional Eastern. It says here, Srila Prabhupada's plan was that the organizers of the conference should find a qualified Oriental artist, Eastern artist, to illustrate each verse according to the directions given by him, because it was in Kumi, Japan. The verses illustrated by the paintings would make an interesting display for the visitors to the conference. He also wished that a book be published containing the text along with the illustrations. So Prabhupada never attended the conference. I guess money was a problem, and the whole thing was postponed. And it was recommissioned 1984 with Madame Yun Sheng Li to take traditional Gongbi style of painting, to take like Chinese style paintings. You can look at some of this, like, I don't know if you can make any of that out. To paired with Srila Prabhupada's manuscript, it's actually really beautiful to look at. If you can get a physical copy, if not, I think I can find a link for. Yeah, there's a copy, but I think I could find a link for a copy that has the artwork in it too online. And the whole book itself is like 90 pages long, right? So we're gonna read it all, which is actually like about the size of the Isopanisad, but we're gonna read it faster. We're gonna at least read the verses, and I'll pick purports to draw from. In 4 classes, we're gonna get through it. It is a book that I was inspired one time to teach to my Bhakti Life group over a few weeks, and I realized what a beautiful little nugget it is. It's one of my favorite books. It's kind of a lesser known gem, Prabhupada's book. So looking forward to that. Hope you'll all enjoy it. And so for next week, read as much of it as you like. Read as much as you can. Light of the Bhagavat. And write down your reflections. Share on WhatsApp your reflections around the devotee in the time of death. Om Tat Sat. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Sri Isopanisad completed for the first time for many, and for the second time or third time for others. Ki jai.
Jai.
Sarva Vaishnava, all the assembled devotees, ki jai. Vancha kalpasrupyascha kripasindhu bhayeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo namo namaha. Hare Krishna. Thanks everybody. We did it.
Thank you, Shamya.
See you next week. See you on WhatsApp. See you on YouTube. Thanks for our online attendees. We love you. And see you later, the Bhagavat. Howdy Bol.
Very well.